Yeah, I've been the National Paracycling Performance Director and Head Coach for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I've been tied up with coaching with Cycling Australia, and more so with the Queensland Academy of Sport for the best part of 20 years. And just 2 years before London, I was approached to be involved with the paracycling program and to be based out of Brisbane.
So what drew you to take on that role with the paracyclists? Was it anything in particular, a new challenge? Or?
Well, I got involved with coaching a long time ago for personal reasons, for my own development and with my own son, and went right through to level 3 and started a high performance coaching course. But at the same time, it was an opportunity to be involved with the national program. I was fortunate enough to have coached a number of paracycling gold medalists, international paracyclists within Queensland, and when the opportunity was there, I thought, well, yeah, it'd be worthwhile.
Okay, very good.
Okay, Ben, I've been working for 2 years as an off-cycle teacher and working with entry-level cyclists, ranging from school children through to adults, but quite a deal with children with disabilities, both physical and intellectual disabilities, behavioural problems, and learning difficulties. So that's really been an area that I've developed an interest in as well.
I've always attacked my coaching, whether they be physically impaired or visually impaired or an able-bodied athlete, with the same sort of philosophy that if they're involved in the sport, it means they want to be involved. So that's the personal motivation. And from there, it's a matter of assessing what their weaknesses are, the same as you do with any athlete. What's their strengths, what their weaknesses. Now, with any impaired athlete, it's a matter of assessing what their impairment is and how we can best work around that.
Yep.
So I suppose my philosophy is that there's no real difference. People are people, and if they're involved in a sport that they want to get better in, it's a matter of putting processes in place that can allow them to reach their full potential.
Okay.
The philosophy that I've developed is one of trying to help the students get to where they want to be in cycling, and it's really varies. Within a group, you might find someone who wants desperately to improve, and others who are happy just to have the absolute basic bike riding skills. Yes. So when you have a group, the first thing I need to know is or to pick up, I think, rather than know, is how they're feeling about what they want to get out of the session that you're having, or a group of sessions.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to that initial assessment. What is their strengths and what's their weaknesses? So to develop the weaknesses, which is generally around what their impairment is, if they're an amputee or if it's cerebral palsy. But I suppose the challenge is really trying to put a resource or a network around that individual that is able to help them develop or improve that particular aspect. I think the biggest challenge has been that there's a lot of people think it's really hard to coach physically impaired people, and it's not. If you do if you're a level 1 cycling coach, it's part of the module of coaching, and it's really just immersing yourself in how do I improve this individual. No different you do with an able-bodied person. So I think the biggest challenge for me really is then when you travel, obviously if it's a hand cyclist or a trike, and the tandems are a bit difficult, but they're just logistical issues. It's no more difficult in real terms because the athletes are aware of what's needed. You might have to have an extra pair of hands to carry a bit of stuff, but generally not a lot.
Okay.
The challenges are they've got the normal hurdles to cross that an able-bodied person has, plus another one, and it's hard for an able-bodied person to understand the situation they're in or how they feel. For instance, if I was to just try and ride a bike with one hand, I'd have to learn how to do that. So that's the biggest thing that we need to overcome.
The thing, and I say this quite openly a lot, the biggest thing is the personal satisfaction that I see in the group around me of supporters and coaches and everything, including myself, when you actually make a difference with someone who has had to overcome adversity in aspects of their life for a long time. So once they come into a sport like cycling, if they learn to love it, it's really, really hard work sometimes. They've got to accept it with the same degree of diligence as any athlete or sports person who wants to get better. So when I see that we're actually able to assist them in that journey to realise their full potential, as long as the commitment and dedication is commensurate with what they want to get out of it,
Yep.
well, seeing the best performance. For me, my best satisfaction comes from not the result, but the improvement in performances in line with what is commensurate with what they're putting in. And I think that's, if you get any of the staff or people that are involved with paracycling, I'd be very surprised if any of them had any other sort of got any other personal satisfaction other than that. So.
Oh, the rewards are great. To see somebody improve, and especially as I'm working with absolute entry level students, to see them pick up the skills and actually start riding in a skillful manner, it's really most fulfilling. Yeah.
For me personally, I actually came from a business management background, so when I came into the sport I was very process orientated. Basically the coach as a manager or the manager as a coach was one of my philosophies and how I went about it, because it's okay to organise coaching and training, but if you don't manage the processes for the individual, whether they be, like I was very fortunate in the early 90s to be blessed with coaching some very, very good athletes. And so the processes that I brought across was very, very much the same. So my philosophy is that if the athlete has to be prepared to do the work first and foremost, and then you tailor what's best for that particular individual. So
my style is quite laid back. I think I like to be relaxed and observe what the students are doing. I find that if I was to change my style, it's not going to work for me or the students.
Yeah.
I think we go back to the same thing as far as once you identify their strengths and weaknesses, then you tailor the program of training, intervention with strength and conditioning or adaptations if required, to suit the individual's development. But one of the big things that we like to try and do is really line up the new introductory type paracyclist with a proactive club, someone who's in a club where there's personnel that can actually give them good advice first and foremost, steer them in the right direction, not necessarily saying they're setting up a coaching or training structure, but really getting them immersed in the sport so the person feels that they're getting really good enjoyment. Sometimes in your training environment there's not a lot of social interaction, there's not a lot of competition environments for paracyclists, so it's also very important that they have a means of feeling that their training is also adding to their quality of life and how their performance and how their physicality is improving towards that best performance.
Yep.
The hand cycle area is quite unique, and because it's not traditional cycling. The trike and the tandem actually has a much greater relevance to traditional cycling. They each have their own unique areas of specialty, but the hand cycling is an area of uniqueness to cycling. I think the big thing is don't be scared of the person. The person who might present who is basically a wheelchair person, and if they've got an interest in what they see as hand cycling, the equipment lines up very much with bicycles. But there is that situation of, okay, they're using upper body. But a lot of the terminology is very similar. You're talking cadence, correct gear selection, equipment to a certain degree, and how to, and if you are talking to a new hand cyclist or someone who wants to get into hand cycling, you talk about 100% of volume, what they may need to do in their training, but the compartmentalisation of a structured training program, I find fairly similar. But obviously there is the difficulty of them being in from a wheelchair. So from my point of view, I like to say, well, if you are presented with someone in a hand cycling environment, yeah, go to someone, put your hand up, talk to someone who knows a bit more about it, but please just don't say, oh look, I don't know nothing about it, I can't help you.
I guess there we have to have the same program as you would for an able-bodied person, and then you need to work with that disabled person and find out how that's affecting their picking up of the skills.
Well, in my role as national head coach, when we come together, it is very much a team environment, and team dynamics comes into play. But because each of them have basically their own classification and they're working on their own distances, their own speciality, it still needs to be very targeted. But in a home-based environment, there's room for both. So I think a lot of the early stuff needs to be a little bit more individual, but that's not necessarily daily contact or stuff like that, but it is a individual tailoring of improving those weaknesses, maintaining the strengths, and when there is the opportunity to come together with another training group, be as integrated as possible. Because what I've often found, as I said before, I've been really pleased to have trained a lot of very, very good athletes, and when we do sort of have paracyclists merged with the able-bodies, as it happened in Glasgow for this year's Commonwealth Games, I know a lot of the able-bodied athletes were really inspired with what they've seen, because everyone is trying to do their best.
Well, obviously individual is more effective. The problem with groups is particularly when you're working with disabled people, their ability to pick up skills varies. Sometimes it will vary because of their level of disability. Other times it will vary because some people just pick things up more quickly than others. So when you've got a group, over an hour, 2 or 3 people might be struggling with a certain skill and somebody else has picked it up and is running with it. So it's that much easier to work with one, even 2, rather than a group.
Motivation is basically an inherent situation. You know, it has to come from within, no matter what. I always talk to athletes along the lines that don't talk to me about motivation, because you're the one out there riding in the rain, the hot, the cold weather, the magpies chasing you, the dogs chasing you. You've got to drag yourself out of bed to go training. So if you're doing those things, you're motivated. What's probably happening more so is that you're having trouble managing other components of your life and trying to get things in order so you can do what you need to do. But I think motivation is one of those, it's a word which is not probably as effective as it could be, because it's really a matter of planning and organising for you as a person to do what you want to do. If you don't want to do it, well, all the cajoling in the world is not going to make that person do it if they don't want to do it. So for me, I don't necessarily try to motivate people. I try to reassess and reevaluate the reasons why you're doing it, why you started to do it, what you want to get out of it, where you are in your journey, and how you want to apply yourself through that journey.
Yeah.
I really believe that they have to be motivated. However, particularly with the younger people, you need to make it fun so that they want to do it. If it's an absolute chore for them, then they're not going to want to do that. It might be slightly different with mature students or mature participants, if they've got the determination, they'll work with the chore. But the younger people, if it becomes a chore, they want to give it away. So it needs to be fun for them.
The whole aspect of a paracyclist for me is that they present, and it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they have some sort of a physical impairment. They may have been born with it. It might be acquired through car accident or other medical issues. So I think if they present to a sport like cycling, it does offer a really unique situation for someone with a physical impairment, because you can get out your front door, you can start training, you can go riding, you've got the freedom. It's not like you have to get to somewhere else to actually start something. So for me, I think that's why a lot of people are attracted to the sport, and the percentage of, or the ratio of physically impaired or disabled, I think that it's growing, that they see cycling as an activity that they like to get in for their own personal and physical benefit. So if that leads into a cycling career, or something they want to challenge themselves to improve and do better times or go faster and longer, well, that's something that I think within Cycling Australia and certainly Cycling Victoria, I applaud what you guys are doing in this area. It's incumbent on us to try and make it as easy as we can for them to be given the opportunity.
Okay.